यस महादेव। अरे ठीक है, कुछ नहीं है। और क्या हो रहा है? हेलो।
हाँ, आ रही है आवाज अब?
हाँ 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 हाँ।
बोले और बताइए कैसे हैं आप?
अरे बढ़िया हूँ। आज प्रोग्राम है ना LGBTQ वाला।
अच्छा, ओके, कितने बजे से है?
7:30 से है।
अच्छा, हाँ, तो टाइम हो गया। हाँ हाँ, वही मुझे लग रहा था वो आज ही से है शायद।
हाँ।
तो जाइए फिर आप उसको अटेंड करिए, फिर बात करते हैं। ये हम अपना अब सारा चीज आप भेज ही दिया है, प्रिंट निकलवा ले रहे। कल होगा तो डिस्पैच कर देना।
कल कर देना, कि होगा क्या, कल कर देना।
हाँ, कल कर देंगे, कल कर।
हम्म। ठीक है। चलो अच्छा, फिर विल टॉक। हाँ।
ठीक है, श्योर,
ओके
ओके।
श्योर।
ओके।
Good evening, ma'am. Nice to see you again in the online platform.
अब तो समय हो ही चुका है। बस शुरू कराते हैं, है ना? हाँ। हाँ।
Akanksha ma'am,
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am, Alka ma'am has joined. Our speaker is also joined. So
Oh,
please start the program.
okay. Good evening, everyone. An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concern to the broader concerns of all humanity. With this beautiful quote by Martin Luther, I welcome you all today in today's event. Thank you so much for joining us at 5 days online add-on course on gender sensitization towards a human understanding of LGBTQ identities organized by Department of English and Spectrum LGBTQIA Club, Vasanta College for Women, Krishnamurti Foundation, Rajghat, Varanasi. Today is a very special day for all of us. We have gathered here to celebrate our love and passion for humanity. This passion is celebrated by inclusive thought and vision of accepting and loving all the gender identities. This 5 day online add on course is the opportunity for us to explore our creative sides and to share our ideas and knowledge with the wider community. A spark can become a flame, and a flame can become a fire. And this journey of formation of this club was similar. We are very thankful to our respected and beloved principal, Professor Alka ma'am, to start this spark, which have now taken a form of beautiful add-on course by Spectrum Club. The courage to make tough decisions and the compassion to listen to the need of others is an art of our respected principal, Professor Alka ma'am. She shows motherly love and gives us fatherly confidence. So it is my pleasure to extend a gracious and inclusive welcome to our respected principal, Professor Alka Singh ma'am, to deliver welcome address.
Thank you, Aisha, for that very brief and warm introduction. And it gives me immense pleasure to be on this platform. And it's like a dream come true. And I am so overwhelmed by all the members of the Spectrum Club, the Department of English, that has made the dream a living event for all of us. We had been planning for a very long time, talking, helping our students to understand what an inclusive society would look at. And finally, this event is definitely a star, a guiding star for all those children who have managed to join today, and also the information which will be shared to those who are not able to join the program. So, first and foremost, lots of blessings and love to the members of the Spectrum Club, Department of English, my two senior colleagues, Saurabh, Dr. Saurabh Singh and Dr. Rachna Pandey, who took the lead in making this happen, and that too with such wonderful participants and outstanding speakers, I think, who will be able to help us all understand what is it that we are looking at when we talk of an inclusive society. Any place which makes you feel a little out of place gives forth desire, longing for a generic place of one's own, where the divisive element or gender is superseded by collective celebration of differences, of queerness, one's passions, one's thoughts. Not obtaining the same, one feels extremely disappointed and feels compelled to ruminate over the future of the subcultures that form the fabric of all our being on this earth. It is people like us who are unable to create a space to make it into an entity that will bring forth all kinds of understanding to what it is to be a living being. Normative hegemony that marginalizes, segregates from the mainstream culture, enforces or voluntarily self exile for the people within. Within the subculture, too, it is strange that we find many sects deterritorialized and territorialized. There is a feeling of being left out within the system itself. So, moving beyond Butler's understanding of queering as an act of non-conformity and the empirical rules that regulate sexual and gender performances, to find ground where one can speak of homonormative just the same way as we talk of heteronormative today. On this note, I would like to welcome our very honorable guest, and I'm humbled by the presence of Professor Ruth Vanita from the United States. So willingly and so humbly was our request accepted that it leaves no place for me but to thank her from the bottom of my heart on behalf of the entire fraternity at Vasanta College for Women, Krishnamurti Foundation, Rajghat, and especially the young members of the Spectrum Club, along with the members of the Department of English. Heading this program, Dr. Saurabh Singh. And ma'am, we welcome you on behalf of everyone who is a part of this program. I feel very happy to also welcome my colleague, Professor Nita Singh, who has always supported us, is a pillar that is there with us and helps us to understand the very importance of each program that we try and decipher for our children. And that is what brings us to an understanding of what we are doing. So thank you, Anita, for being with us, for supporting us today. I also welcome all the participants and all those guest speakers who have joined this platform. And I look forward to a 5-day of mind-boggling situations, equations, understanding of what it is to be a proper human being. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Akanksha.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this splendid welcome address. Your endless care, guidance, and support prove that you are a great leader. Thank you once again. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Rachna Pandey, ma'am, Assistant Professor, Department of English, and convener of the Spectrum Club, to throw some light on the concept behind the formation of this beautiful initiative in the form of 5-day online course. She is a true catalyst behind this concept, and it is her diligent effort that we are sitting here, discussing here, and getting enlightened. So I request ma'am to kindly share her concept note.
Thank you, Akanksha ma'am. Before I begin, I would correct Akanksha ma'am because it's the effort of Professor Alka Singh ma'am. In fact, it's her idea and also Saurabh sir's initiative. So three of us and Manjri Junjunwala ma'am and Sunita Arya ma'am are also involved into that. So very good evening and a very warm welcome to one and all. At the very outset, I would like to quote Dalai Lama, who said Love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. It is a very important day for all of us as a member of Spectrum and LGBTQIA Club and Department of English as we are starting the 5-day online add-on course on gender sensitization towards a human understanding of LGBTQ identities with the first batch, and at the same time introducing the new club of our college, that is the Spectrum, which is an initiative of 5 students of our college of BA second year. And this innovative idea is supported by our principal, ma'am, Professor Alka Singh, who has taken it to another level by introducing an add-on course on this very subject. Earlier, we were planning a workshop, one-time workshop on the same subject, but as ma'am has suggested that this won't create a strong impact and long-lasting impact that we are looking for, that we are visualizing. That is why, taking ma'am's suggestion, we have designed an add-on course which will be initially conducted annually, and later it will be conducted biannually by the Spectrum Club and the Department of English, which will further create a meaningful impact. And we hope that it ignites students to explore the field for study. This course intends to create awareness and develop an understanding of LGBTQIA identities through gender sensitization training by using various experimental, not traditional, but experimental pedagogical methods. And in this course, the course participants will acquire the basic understanding and appropriate attitude to be developed to understand various gender identities, sexual orientations, and the gender-based dynamics existing in the society. Of course, this course is an interdisciplinary course open for the students, not only open for the students of Department of English, but it is open for the students, research scholars, and faculties of humanities, social sciences, and other disciplines. We have created a very simple structure of this course, not making it extremely complicated, because our vision is to create an impact through gender sensitization, and our references, our reading material, and our pedagogy is extremely simplified so that participants will be able to learn wholeheartedly instead of being burdened with the evaluation patterns and the presentations. So we have simplified the whole thing, and primarily this whole course is divided into 8 sessions, and we will be having 2 sessions each day, except inaugural and valedictory, where we are having 1 session each. So in this course, we are accepting as a team to have an active participation as well as suggestions and feedbacks from our participants to make this course, which is it's a new course, it's a new initiative. So we want to make this course to be improved, to be very effective. So we want a very engaging participants, the students, who can be actively engaged with the sessions, interact with our speakers, and keep on giving their feedback, whatever it be. And we will take it very seriously throughout this duration. Of course, you can approach any one of us. We are 8 in this team, the Spectrum plus Department of English. So your feedback is really important to us. So be very active throughout the sessions so that we can make a larger impact through this course. That's all. Thank you so much. Over to you, Akanksha ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for making us understand the vision behind the entire concept. Thank you once again. Now, moving ahead, today we are immensely proud and happy to have with us an eminent personality, Professor Ruth Vanita ma'am. Professor Ruth Vanita ma'am was educated entirely in India and taught at Delhi University for many years before the University of Montana. She was the co-founder of Manushi, India's first nationwide feminist magazine, and volunteered as its co-editor for 13 years. She has published many books, including Sappho and the Virgin Mary, Same Sex Love and the English Literary Imagination, A Play of Light, Selected Poems, Love's Right, Same Sex Marriage in India, Gender, Sex, and the City, Urdu poetry in India 1780-1870, and Dancing with the Nation, Courtesans in Bombay cinema. She co-edited The Path-Breaking Same-Sex Love in India, a literary history in 2000. She has published over 70 scholarly articles and translated several works of fiction and poetry from Hindi and Urdu. Most recently, My Family, Hindi poet Mahadevi Verma's book about, about her companion animals. Her first novel, Memory of Light, appeared from Penguin in 2020. Her most recent book is The Dharma of Justice in the Sanskrit Epics Debates on Gender, Varna, and Species, which is published by Oxford University Press 2022. Her second book of poems, The Broken Rainbow, will appear this year, and her second novel, A Slight Angle, next year. Her translation, On the Edge, 100 Years of Hindi Fiction on Same Sex Desire, will also appear next year. She is now working on a book on Shakespeare. So I request ma'am to deliver keynote address.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to try and share the screen now. If that doesn't work, then you will have to share the PowerPoint. No, it's not working. I'm always able to do it on Zoom, but not on Google Meet. So now you will have to show the PowerPoint, and I will talk about it, tell you when to change the screen. So yeah, so please share the PowerPoint.
Rashika ma'am, please share the PowerPoint.
Yes, ma'am. Just a second. I'm sharing.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible on the screen. Make it full screen. Rashika ma'am. Slideshow.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about today about same-sex marriage, which I prefer to call marriage equality because it is basically to give the equal right to marry to every woman, all consenting adults. I'll start with this. You know, as you know, the case, several petitions are pending in the Supreme Court. They were in the Delhi High Court, but the Supreme Court has transferred it. And there are cases from many couples as well as individuals from the whole political spectrum, from the so-called right to the so-called left. And okay, so here is one of the couples, Kavita Arora and Ankita Khanna. They have filed a suit in 2020 in the Delhi High Court, now in the Supreme Court, asking for the right to marry under the Special Marriage Act. Next slide. Parag Mehta and Vaibhav Jain. These are only some of the couples. I'm just giving you examples. They were married by a Jain ceremony in Texas, and they have filed the case under the Foreign Marriage Act because, as it is now, same-sex couples get married in other countries like all over Europe, in the US, and South Africa, and Argentina, and Brazil. So many countries which have same-sex marriage. But when they come to India, they are treated as legal strangers to one another. Their marriage is not recognized, and they don't have any rights of marriage. Next slide. Yeah.
The slides, Rashika.
Oh, you haven't been changing them? Yeah, please change them. Can I
Rashika,
say, please change it? Yeah.
हाँ,
All right.
चलेगा.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'm changing slides.
All right. So my first and most important point is this idea of marriage equality or of recognizing this equal right of same-sex couples to get married is not an idea imported from the West, because many people think that it is, but it is not. It's also not an upper class phenomenon. So many people think, oh, it's just an upper class, upper caste idea. It's not. How do we know this? So there are two reasons, main reasons, which I'm going to talk about today. One is, since 1980, many young, low income, non English speaking women all over the country have been getting married. They had no contact with any movement. In fact, there was no movement. In 1980, in the 1980s, there was no LGBT movement at all. There was no gay movement. These young women didn't know any word like gay or lesbian or anything, but they have just been getting married. And when they were prevented from getting married, many of them committed joint suicide, leaving behind suicide notes saying that they will be married in the next life. Okay. This is what my book Love's Right is about, which I'll talk about. Now, these women include, who are they? They include Dalits, tribals, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, fisherwomen, factory workers, agricultural laborers. There's a whole students, college students. There's a whole range of these couples. Most of them are women, but some are men also. There are some male couples also. And the second reason why this is not an idea imported from the West is because in pre 20th century Indian literature, there are many references to same sex unions and some references to same sex marriage. Okay, next slide. So let me give you the first same-sex marriage that we know of in India. There may have been earlier ones. This is the first one reported in the press. Okay, so these are two young police women in 1987, Leela Namdeo and Urmila Srivastava. Yeah, one of them was a widow with children. Leela was a widow with children, and they got married. They were in the police. They got married in a temple in Madhya Pradesh in 1987, and they took photographs of themselves. Huh? Now the police suspended them from their jobs and they had to go back to Urmila's village. Now Urmila's family accepted Leela as their daughter-in-law, and to console them, Urmila's family held a wedding reception for them in the village. At that time, at that
Ma'am, the slide is not changing, so there's some discrepancy in understanding. Slides are still fixed.
that is very strange. Just press the downward arrow or just move with your mouse, move to the next slide. You managed to do one of them, so go to the next slide. Just try to do it. Anyway, if we can't do it, that's very unfortunate because I have photographs of all these young women. Anyway,
I'm doing it, ma'am. Is it not visible on the screen? I mean, I'm very much with the on the same page as you are.
It's visible, ma'am, now.
yeah,
Okay,
well,
okay.
look at
Thank you.
one, which was the police women. I hope you saw that. Okay. So when when these two policewomen got married, Urmila and Leela, then journalists went to the village to talk to them. This is the slide before this one. Okay, journalists went to talk to them and interviewed the people there. Now, one of Urmila's neighbors, who was a married woman married to a man, so Sheila Bhavasar, village school teacher she told the journalist, after all, what is marriage? It is a wedding of two souls. Where in the scriptures is it said that it has to be between a man and a woman? Now, this is a very interesting idea, which later other scholars, she was not a scholar, she was just a village school teacher, but other scholars and priests have also come up with this same idea. I'll come to that. Okay, next slide, which you have. Don't change the slide. This is the slide you have right now. Now, this is another example. So I want to just say that in 1987, when Leela and Urmila got married, the first reported marriage, there was no legal gay marriage anywhere in the world. Okay, so it happened in India before it happened anywhere in the world. As far as we know, there was no legal marriage, was not recognized legally anywhere in the world, and this happened. Okay, and there are several others. I'm just giving you one example. Okay. Now, somewhat later one, in 2012, these two Kandha tribals in Odisha, Vetka Polang and Melka Nilsa, they eloped and they ran away to another village. The neighbors were very angry with them. And look at them. If you just look at their pictures, you can see not only do they not know English, they have no contact with any women's movement, no identity like lesbian or anything like that. And they just love each other, but they want to get married. That's it. They are extremely poor. They are working as day laborers, agricultural laborers, right? So then the family, the family and the community discussed it, and finally they agreed to allow them to get married. And the village elder says they love each other very much, so we decided to forgive them. So they realized that love is important. That's what they realized, and now they're planning to adopt Vetka's elder brother's son. Next slide. Okay, so this is a case. Next slide, please. Hello, can you move to the next slide? Hello, can you hear me? All right, you've missed one
Ma'am,
slide.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I can hear you.
You've missed one slide. Go back to the one before this.
Okay.
All right, this is
This one,
so.
ma'am.
Yes. In 2018, these two women, Bhavna Thakur and Asha Thakur, they had been forcibly married to men by their families, and they decided to commit joint suicide. This is 2018, sorry. They jumped into the river and killed themselves, and they wrote this suicide. This is a very typical example. I'm only giving you a few examples out of many examples. And in this suicide note, which is written in Gujarati, in the suicide note, which is written in Gujarati on a paper plate, they say, "We have left this world to live with each other. The world did not allow us to stay together. Perhaps in the next birth we will meet again." Now, there are many couples who commit joint suicide and who leave this type of suicide note saying, "In the next world we will be married, in the next life we will be married." And this is very important because it refers to the doctrine of rebirth, which all the four Indian religions accept. That is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism all believe in rebirth. And the idea here is, I'll come back to this idea. It's, I think, a very important idea for Indian marriages, which is that if you fall in love so much that you want to get married, you are so attached, even though it is very difficult, this shows that you were attached in a previous life. Several priests have said this, several scholars and gurus have said this, and several ordinary people have said it too. And therefore, if you're not allowed to marry in this life or be together, then you will be together in the next life. And this is not something which can be suppressed. Okay, so that's an important sort of Indian angle on the whole situation. Okay, next slide. Next slide.
I've changed it, ma'am.
It hasn't changed on the screen.
Ma'am, I think it's taking 1 or 2 minutes in getting visible.
Ma'am, do it again so that it gets visible to us. Rachika, ma'am.
Fine. Is the older one visible? That suicide note written in Gujarati?
Yes.
Now I'm changing. Now is the next slide visible?
No.
Cousins from Rohania village.
Anyway, never mind. All right. So the next example I was giving is these two young women. This is very recently in 2019 from Rohania village in UP. Again, you can see they are village girls. They married at a temple. They came to Varanasi and got married at a temple there. So the priest refused to conduct the marriage, but they wouldn't move from the temple. So they basically sat on dharna till he agreed to marry them. Then they approached the police, and the police warned the families not to harass the girls. I don't know what has happened after this. I mean, anything could have happened. They're so young that they probably could be forced to separate by their families. They may not have economic independence. Okay, next slide. Can you not move it at all? Does anybody else have access to it? Somebody sort of technically. No? All right. So this is the book that I wrote about these marriages and joint suicides. Okay. It's called Love's Right. It was first published in 2005. In 2005, there was no discussion in India about marriage because in 2005, homosexuality itself was still illegal. Section 377, which the British had passed this law, which made homosexuality illegal in 1861. And that was overturned only in 2018. So when I published this book in 2005 about these young women who had been getting married and committing joint suicide, it had been happening by then for 25 years at least. This did not get much attention, but now that the marriage cases are in court and marriage equality is being demanded, the book has come back into, there's been an updated edition in 2021 and another updated edition in 2023. Go to the next slide, please.
Is it visible, ma'am?
Yes, go to the next slide, please. Next slide.
This one, ma'am. Aditya Advani and Michael Tarr.
No, the one before that.
Okay. This one?
You're always skipping one slide. When you move, you're skipping one slide. Just press only once and go to the next slide.
This one, ma'am.
So far, nothing is visible. Anyway, there is a new edition coming out in 2023 of Love's Right, in which they talk about the importance of the book and the importance of the issue. So in this new edition, there is a list of all the couples that I have. It's not a complete list. There are many more couples in I'm sure, but there's a list of the couples that I have from 1988 words to the present, yeah, with the places and the names. Okay, now go to the next slide, which is Aditya Bani.
Is it visible, ma'am?
No, it's not.
Shall I stop sharing my screen and share it again? Maybe it gets visible then.
Yes, please try.
Yes, please.
Okay, just a second, ma'am. Please, just a second.
Yes, it's visible now.
It is visible now.
Okay, yes. Just go to the previous slide. Go to the previous slide for a second, the one I talked about. Go to the previous second. That, so this is of the list of the couples. Okay. Even mics. There's all kinds of interfering sound. Okay. Now go to the next slide. Aditya Advani. Next one, yeah. Turn off people not speaking. Please turn off mics. We can hear your conversation.
राशिका मैम अलका
yes,
मैम का
ma'am.
शायद माइक ऑन है, उसको म्यूट कीजिए प्लीज.
Okay. She has muted it.
Okay. So now this was the US edition of the book, and this is I just want to talk about this couple whom I'll come back to later. This is one of the few male couples, Aditya Advani and Michael Tar. Michael is American, Aditya is Indian. They got married in Delhi in Aditya's home in 1993. They got married, so that's really early. The family arranged it. The mother arranged it, the marriage. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, please go to the next. No, it's not visible yet. So it's still on Aditya Advani. Are you not able to see the screen on the meeting where you can see if it has actually changed? Yeah, okay. Yes. One more couple. In 2001, Jaya and Tanuja, two nurses. Now, this is all at a time when homosexuality is still illegal. Jaya and Tanuja got married in Patna in 2001. There was a ceremony at the Mahamaya temple with 200 guests. And at this ceremony, Jaya's sister, Jaya's the one in the dupatta, got married to a man at the same time, and Jaya's entire family was present. And my point here is that the priest conducted the marriage, two women, and then also a woman and a man at the same time. It was treated as equal on that level. Okay, next slide. This is the temple where they got married. The Mahamaya Goddess Temple is one of the 52 Shakti Peeths. That time it was in Bihar, now it is in Chhattisgarh. And the original temple was built in the 13th century, and several of these weddings have taken place at goddess temples. I think this is somewhat significant. Okay, now you can skip one slide, skip the next slide, and go to the next one. Skip this and go to the next one.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so now there were lots of couples. One of the cases I was involved with, they were running away they were middle class. One of them was a doctor, but still the families were harassing them because one of their fathers was a policeman. They ran away from Bombay and came to Delhi. And when these young women run away, they had nowhere to live, nowhere to go. And this is why many of them could be forcibly separated and forced to marry men. But this is one of the few organizations, Maya Shankar and Betu Singh's organization, Sangini, one of the few organizations that actually gave shelter to these couples. Most of the organizations don't do this. And then the father of the one who was a policeman broke into the house and got into a physical fight, beat up Betu. Betu is the one on the right side, the one in the black shirt. And she was all of 5 feet tall, but she risked her life to help these. Now, unfortunately, Betu has died, untimely death. Next slide. Okay, another example in 2021. So there was a mass Dalit wedding of Dalit women to Dalit men. And here, one Dalit woman married a Brahmin woman. They got married in Agra, and this is many of these weddings are interjati. They're usually the same class, the same group of people living because they meet each other in the neighborhood, but very often they are between different jatis. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is, I encourage you to go to YouTube and listen to this video, because now that people can make their videos and put it on YouTube, we can actually hear the voices of these women, which was not possible before. And now there are several videos on YouTube of these two women, Deepshika and Abhilasha, who are from a village called Hamirpur in UP. And they were both married to men, but they left the men and then they got married. They went to the officer of the Registrar of Marriages. Of course, the Registrar of Marriages refused to register their marriage. So outside the office, they garlanded each other, and they put the Jaimala, and they got a contract drawn up saying that they are making each other the partners. You can do a legal contract, and they did that legal contract. So they say they have been now for 6 years, and they asked in the video, they asked the government, if you listen to the video, they're speaking in Hindi, and it's very clearly village Hindi. They asked the government to recognize the marriage and help them get the same rights as other citizens. This also is an interjati marriage. Okay, next slide. Skip this one. Next slide. Skip this also. Go to the next. Another Maya goddess temple in Assam. And here these two villagers, I don't have a picture of the two women, but this is the temple where they got married. Tingrik and Ranati Basamutari, same group, so they both have the same surname. They got married in 1999. It's a very interesting case, which I write about in the book, where in their own village, they were not allowed to get married. They were beaten up in public. They ran away. They went from village to village trying to find a place to stay. Finally, they found one village which accepted them, and they have been living there for many years, since they got married in 1999. In 2012, some journalists interviewed them, and they talked about it. One of them is an agricultural laborer, the other one is a domestic help, a servant, and they talked about it. And the most interesting point of this marriage was that there was a legislative assembly election, and when the candidates came to the village to ask for votes, the villagers said to them, look, these two women, they are very respected members of the community, and they don't have any rights in marriage, so please give some legal recognition to their marriage. And the candidates were surprised, and they said, okay, we will try. And then this was before there was any movement for marriage. The villagers said this. And then Tingring, in the journalist talking to her, Tingring at the end says, all that we know that the candidates said that, but they may not do anything. All that we poor people have is hope. Okay, next slide. Okay, so you can skip this. Go to the next slide. This is the marriage of Aditya Advani and Michael Tara. This is one of the few examples where we can see the wedding ceremony in 1993. The wedding was performed by Swami Bodhananda Saraswati, whom I know and whom I interviewed, and I'll talk about that later. Aditya's mother, Kanta Advani, is on the extreme left here. You can just see her face. Okay, next slide. So Aditya and Michael lived in San Francisco for many years, and then they relocated and came back to Delhi, and now they live in Delhi, and they had these twin babies by surrogacy. Next slide. This is the children now, who are about 10, 11 years old. Okay, next slide. Now I'm going to ancient Indian literature, ancient and medieval Indian literature. And I just wanted to point out, this is the second proof, the second piece of evidence that marriage equality or same-sex marriage is not a Western idea. Because the idea of these lifelong unions between people of the same-sex couples is there in our literature centuries before. Okay, so the Kathasarit Sagara, you may have heard of it. It's an 11th century story cycle, this a series of stories in Sanskrit. In this, there are at least two or three stories of same-sex unions. One of them is of these two men, Pulindika and Vasudatta. So Pulindika is a daku, a bandit, and he's trying to rob this Vasudatta, this merchant who is traveling, a merchant, a trader. But when he sees him, he falls in love with him at first sight. So this is the British translator's language. And the feelings that he has when he sees Vasudatta, the language used to describe those feelings, is the same description that Vasudatta has when he first sees his wife. Okay, so then they start living together, and Vasudatta gets married to a woman. Pulindika doesn't get married to a woman. The three of them, they're living together. And at the end of the story, it goes on for some time, Vasudatta jumps off a cliff because he has some memory of his earlier birth and all that. There's a reason. He jumps off a cliff. His wife follows him, and then Pulindika also follows him, so that they can be reunited in the next birth. So we know about this sati, about the stories of sati, where very often the woman is forced to kill herself when her husband dies, and in some cases it's voluntary. But what we often don't realize is there are many cases also of males in the literature of men committing, it's not called sati, but men killing themselves when their close male friend dies. Okay, go to the next slide. So here in this text, in Katha Sagara, this is the explanation given for love, which one cannot explain. Any love that you cannot explain. This is and as we know, he says, Vakti janamantara pritim manaha sneha karanam. Sneha karanam, sneha jo bina karan ke uthta hai. So affection that arises in the heart without any cause. What is that about? That tells you that this is love persisting from a former birth. And this is the Indian explanation that has been given. Any likes and dislikes can't explain that it comes from a previous birth, this attachment, whether it's to a person, a place, an activity, whatever it may be. And this is an explanation that has been given repeatedly for disapproved of marriages. For example, in the same book, Katha Sagar, there are cases of a very poor, so-called lower caste person falling in love, or what we would now call Dalit person, falling in love with a princess or a prince. And then it seems like an impossible marriage. So they think of committing suicide, but then they have dreams, and their parents have dreams in which it is proved that they were married in a former birth. Okay, and then that is considered a justification for getting married. So rebirth is often offered as a reason for approving of an otherwise disapproved marriage. And this has happened in many same-sex couples cases. Many of the priests who got them married, many of the women themselves have given rebirth as the explanation. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, in this book, Katha Sagara, it's a Sanskrit book, there is a word used which I found very interesting. It is called Swamvara Sakha. A man's male friend whom he chooses himself is his Swamvara Sakha, and a woman's female friend whom she chooses herself is called a Swamvara Sakhi. Now, we know this word, same as Swamvara, we normally think that means a woman choosing her own husband. It does mean that. But if you look at the meaning, actual literal meaning of the word, what does it mean? Swam is self, Vara means to choose. Okay, so Vara as bridegroom means the one who is chosen. But Swam Vara, the one you have chosen, could be anyone. And then when you add the word Sakha or Sakhi, then it becomes a self-chosen same-sex friend. So there is also a story of women. So Prabha and Kalinga Sena who fall in love at first sight. That is also a story told in the Katha Sagara, which you will find if you look at my book Same Sex Love in India, which I co-edited with Salim Kitwai. You will find there this story translated. Yeah, both this Soma Prabha and Kalinga Sena story is translated there. So another point I want to just point out here, the word sakha, a friend, is actually part of the Hindu wedding ceremony. When you take those 7 vows, the Vedic vows, the last one you address your spouse as sakha. So marriage is based on friendship. Marriage is a type of friendship in ancient texts, and friendship is a type of marriage. Very close friendship, lifelong friendship, not the kind of friend you just go to coffee with, but the ancient idea of friendship, where you only have one friend who is absolutely unique, who is your second self, who is your other self. That friendship is also a type of marriage. Okay, next slide. And here is an image, a picture of a statue. The statue is 11th century, made in the 11th century out of sandstone. It's about 9 feet high, so taller than a human being. And it's a beautiful statue. The reproduction doesn't do it justice. Where you see the god Kama, the god of love and desire, is shooting an arrow at 2 women. When I just came across the statue by chance in the Seattle Asian Art Museum, I just walked in, it was there in the foyer, and it's completely stunning. And you see this beautiful smile on the face of Kamadeva, and the beautiful smile on the faces of the 2 women. It's this triangular kind of repetition of this smile. And this is 11th century. It's about the same time as the Katha Sagara, this text I was just talking about. And you see this representation of same-sex love and desire. Next slide. Okay, giving you one more example from ancient texts. In the 14th century, there is Kritivasa Ramayana is the most popular Ramayana in Bengali. And there are many manuscripts of it. So the manuscripts, there are some differences in the manuscripts. Now, in some of the manuscripts, there are these stories told about these 2 women who fall in love, who have sex, and who produce a child together. It's not there in all the manuscripts, but it's in some of the manuscripts. And this story also, you will find it fully translated and analyzed in Love's Right. Okay, so here in this story, there are 2 women who are widows. Their names are Chandra and Mala, and they are married to King Dilipa, who is an ancestor of Sri Ram, right? They are married to him, but then he dies and without any children. So the lineage is going to come to an end. So the gods make a plan that these two women should produce a child. Now, in Hindu texts, there are many ways of producing children. Some children spring out of the head, out of the thighs. It doesn't have to be between two women, but the author has written it in this way that there's a romantic monsoon season. As we know, romantic monsoon season is romantic, and in that these two widows, co-widows, the Chandra and Mala, they just embrace and kiss each other spontaneously. And then one of them finds that she is pregnant. She becomes pregnant. She doesn't know how this has happened, and this would be a disgrace for her. So she is going to commit suicide in the Saryu River. This is Ayodhya. So she's going to commit suicide there. But then Brahma stops her. And Brahma stops her and he says, listen to me. The son will be beautiful, whom you are going to have. If there is any demerit or papa is often translated as sin, which is a wrong translation. It means demerit, some demerit which will affect your further life. If there's any demerit in you, let me bear it. You can go free of it. Now, there are two widows having sex, so that could be the demerit. It may not be about being the same sex. We don't know. And then the boy is born. And the most interesting thing about this boy is that the author says that he's named Bhagiratha. You know who Bhagiratha is, Bhagiratha Prayatna, who brought the Ganga from heaven to earth. And in other stories elsewhere in India of Bhagirath, he has a mother and a father. Dilipa is his father. But in these versions in Bengal, there are several texts in Bengal. The Padma Puran, written in Bengal, also tells the story that he is born to these two women. And the author gives the explanation of his name, saying Bhage Bhage Sambhoga. He is born of Sambhoga, mutual enjoyment, between two bhagas. The word bhaga has several meanings, about 100 meanings in Sanskrit. One of the meanings is a vulva. And using vulva, vagina, or womb, using that meaning, the author says that is why he's called Bhagiratha. Now, the author may be wrong about this meaning, but what is interesting is that in the 14th century, the author is thinking of this. Okay, next slide. Another example, there are many examples of long-term relationships in Muslim India also, in Muslim kingdoms. For example, these two 18th century poets, Maulvi Mukarram Baksh and Mukarram, they one was older, one was younger. When the Maulvi died, the younger one observed Iddat, which is the period of mourning that Muslim widows observe for their husbands. So he observed Iddat, and then he inherited all the Maulvi's properties. So this is as close as it comes to marriage. Okay, and there are many other examples of this kind of one man. These are mostly men. One man falling in love with another man, and then getting into troubles. In some cases, police constable arrests one of them, threatens him with execution, and so on. And then Emperor Akbar saves him. This is the story. The tomb is still there in Lahore of these two men who are buried together. One of them is a Sufi, Sufi Shah Hussain, and Madhulal was his disciple. Okay, next slide. Then in the late 18th, early 19th century, there's a very interesting kind of Urdu poetry. It's ghazals and usual type of Urdu poetry. But instead of having a male speaker, usually in the ghazal, the speaker is a man. Here the speaker is a woman. And the topic of the ghazal is all about women's lives and women's loves. And most of the love is between women. So it's very interesting poetry. I learned Urdu, in fact, to read this poetry, to be able to read it. And I wrote this book on it, Gender, Sex and the City. The reason Smita Patil is on the cover is because she sings one of those songs in the film Mandi. She actually sings one of those songs by this Urdu poet, Inshallah Khan Insha. He wrote this kind of poetry. Go to the next slide. So in this poetry, the poetry is very beautiful. It's about the love between these women. It's playful, it's humorous, it's funny. He falls in love with a neighbor woman who comes in just to borrow something, and she says, why are you bothering? Why are you coming? If you're coming, you must stay. Why are you going away? And things like that. They talk about giving meher, and meher, of course, is the dower, the money given at time of wedding by the groom to the bride. So they talk about meher between two women. So, and then one of the poets, Saadat Yar Khan Rangeen is his name, 1755 to 1835 are his dates. He wrote a lot of this poetry. This poetry is called Rekhti. He wrote a lot of this poetry, and he gives descriptions of the rituals that women used to perform to enter into long-term unions. And one of the most interesting ones is this one. There are several words that women use, that these poets use, saying that these are words used by women for their female companions. And these words are also in dictionaries of the time. So one of the words is dogana, which means the second self, the other self, a woman's other self. Another word is zanakhi, which comes from a ritual that they perform. And another word is elaichi. So you become another woman's elaichi. And this is the description of the ritual by which you become elaichi. That is, you basically feed each other. Feeding is part of these rituals. You feed each other elaichis. And then the last line is the most interesting, where he says, then they get married. He uses the word shadi. They get married among their female companions, and these are called ilaichi. Among their female companions is also an interesting term, because we don't know who these women are, but they may be already married to men. So you may be married to a man, which was an arranged marriage, but then among your most people spend most of their time with people of their own sex. Men spend their time with other men, and women spend their time with other women at home. So you get married among your female companions who are recognized as a female couple. So this is one possible meaning of this. Some of these women were also tawayas, courtesans, who were of course living with other women, and so many of them they had relationships with each other, which were their longest lasting relationships. So the two kind of places where female long-term unions could flourish. One is among co-widows. When two women are married to a same man and the man dies, now what happens to those two women? They spend the rest of their lives together. What is their relationship to each other? In a way, you are married to each other because you are spending your life together and you are connected through marriage. And then you may, in literature, you usually show that these women hate each other and are jealous of each other. That's not always true. Co-wives can also be very close friends, as we know of Kaushalya and Sumitra, who were very close friends. So they can get married. So some of these women could also have been in love, and that also is depicted in literature. And that's one place. The other place is tawayifs. When you're tawayifs or courtesans, tawayifs there are different words for them in other parts of the country. You are living in an all-female household. And the wives are not sex workers. That's a mistake. We often think they were sex workers. They are not. They don't sleep with anyone for cash. They have long-term relationships with one man at a time. Okay, and so they know who the father of their children is. And some of them were very highly propertied, very educated, very accomplished women. And the poets, male poets, write poems about these women, honoring them as their colleagues. So the women also wrote poetry. They performed poetry. They danced to the poetry performed, written by the male poets as well. And so the male poets had a close relationship with them, and that is why they knew about their lives and they write about it. Okay. Next slide. So this is my novel, Memory of Light. It's basically a story about love between two female friends who are both tawayifs, one from Banaras, one from Lucknow. And in this, I depict two women getting married by performing that ritual, which Rangeen describes. So I also translated this into Hindi. This book is also there in Hindi, and the name of the Hindi book is Pariyon Ke Beech, because courtesans used to be called Pari, or any beautiful person could be called a Pari. So Pariyon Ke Beech, in English, the publisher did not like that name because they said it sounded like a children's story. But anyway, okay, next slide. Okay, so just to remind you, this was the marriage of Aditya and Michael. Go to the next slide. So for my book Love's Right, I interviewed several gurus and priests who had performed same-sex marriages. And other journalists have also interviewed some of them, so I drew on that. So Swami Bodhananda Saraswati is a major guru with a big following in India and abroad. And I interviewed him at length, and that interview appears in Love's Right. So one of the things I asked him was like, why did you, this is a very early, in 1993, there was no talk of same-sex marriage. So I asked him like, what was he thinking when he performed the marriage of these two men? And he gave a long explanation. But he said, one of the things he said, look, these two men want to live together. They love each other. So it has to have the blessings of God and of parents and elders. And I chanted a mantra from the Upanishads for their prosperity and their love. And he also went on to say to me, look, all relationships have the same problem. Whether it is a man-woman relationship or a woman-woman or a man-man, all relationships ultimately are the same. They will all have problems and quarrels and so many things. And this is, I thought, was a very important point of his. So we may think that a same-sex relationship is totally different from a man-woman relationship. It's not. Ultimately, what it all comes down to over time is you are doing the same things together. You are cooking together, eating together, maybe raising children together, going out together, meeting your friends, falling sick, dying, etc., growing old. It's the same thing. There is no difference, and you will have the same problems. So as a guru, of course, his point is that ultimately you have to go beyond all desire. But to go beyond all desire, you have to go through desire. Most people have to go through desire. And so it is like any other relationship you have to go through. Okay, next slide. Another person I interviewed was a priest in America, in Seattle. He's from India, of course. He's a Shiva priest. He's a computer engineer in the daytime, as many priests are there, have other jobs. And in the evenings, he performs these, and weekends, he works as a priest. He comes from a long line of Shaiva priests. So he performed the marriage of these two Tamil women, Mala Nagarajan and Vegavahini Subramaniam, in 2002 in Seattle. And I interviewed him. That was a very quick and short interview after the wedding. And he said to me, look, when I was asked to marry these two women, I had never heard of such a thing before and I had never thought about it. But then I thought about it. And he said, when I thought about it, I thought, look, what is marriage? Hindu marriage is a samskara. It is not a contract. Muslim marriage is a contract. You have a nikah nama. Hindu marriage is not a contract, it's a samskara. And it is a union of spirits. It's a union of Atman. Now, the Atman, the spirit, what is it? It is not male and it's not female, right? Most religions, in fact, would agree with that. The Atman is not male or female. It's only the body which is male or female. Yeah. So body changes. Everything about the body changes when you are reborn. When you are reborn, everything changes. Your sex can change, your species can change, you can be born as an animal, your everything changes, your physical appearance changes, everything changes, your caste, class, everything changes, right? But the only thing which doesn't change is the attachments. That is what goes with the Atman from one birth to another. So it's a union of spirits, and the spirit is not male or female. So why should the spirits not be joined in marriage? This was his point. And what I found very interesting, that is the same exact thing that village school teacher said in 1987 at the time of Leela and Ulma's marriage. When the journalist asked that village school teacher, Sheila Bhavasar, she said, well, where is it that it has to be a male and female? It's a union of spirits. So what we see here is a very little educated woman and a very highly scholarly priest have the same understanding of Atman and the same understanding of rebirth, which I think is a very important framing for marriages in Indic religions. Okay, next slide. So these two women, Mala and Vega, who are still together now, they're looking after their parents. They have siblings, but they are the ones looking after their parents. Mala's mother lives with them, and this very often happens. It's the gay children who may not have children or may have children who end up looking after the parents. And Vega's parents are living next door. They are looking after all of them. They moved to this old community of old people so that they could look after their parents. Okay. Anyway, so they sued. Don't change the slide, right? They sued the state of Washington in the US to overturn this law called the Defense of Marriage Act. The Defense of Marriage Act was basically to not recognize same-sex marriages performed in other states or other countries. So they sued and they actually won that lawsuit. I was at this wedding. There were 155 guests at the wedding, but the families were divided. Mala's mother was there and Vega's father was there, but the other two parents were not there. Their siblings were there. Okay, so go to the next slide. Okay, so to come back to my first point is that the idea of same-sex marriage doesn't come from the West or from the modern urban upper class. It's not an upper caste idea to begin with. It comes, as I've given you all these examples, the earliest, the pioneers, the ones I consider the pioneers, and in many cases the martyrs of the movement because they committed suicide and they died, are these poor, low-income, young, uneducated, non-English speaking couples. Most of them women, but some men as well. Okay. But let's come to the rich, the upper class, the high jati people. Even they suffer from legal discrimination against same-sex marriage. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Okay, so when an Indian citizen or a man who, say, let's say, you have an OCI or you're an Indian citizen. OCI is overseas citizen of India. You are an Indian living abroad, but you have an overseas citizen of India. Now, if you marry a non-Indian woman, a man marries a woman or a woman marries a man, that foreign spouse immediately has the right to get an OCI card. You apply for it and you get it. That means the foreign spouse now has the right to live in India permanently. It's a lifelong visa, to work in India, to open a bank account, to take a loan, to own property, everything except voting. Everything except voting or holding public office, you have all rights. Now, this happens if a man marries a woman, the next day she can apply for the foreign spouse can apply for the OCI. But the foreign same-sex spouse of an Indian citizen, if you are an Indian citizen or an Indian OCI holder, your foreign spouse has no rights at all. You may be married in any other country. When you come to India, you are a legal alien. You have no rights whatsoever. Your spouse can only get a tourist visa and stay in India for 6 months at a time. So let me give you the example of Aditya and Michael. They're married in 1993. So that's how long they've been together, 30 years. But when COVID happened, basically, because Michael is American, he only has a tourist visa. He can only stay in India for 6 months at a time. After that, he has to go out for some time and come back. Okay, so he had gone to England to do that. And while he was there, COVID happened. So when COVID happened, nobody could come in. Fine. But then after some time, while COVID was still there, the foreign spouses who had OCIs, they were allowed to come back to India. But Michael did not. So he was not allowed to come back to India, and he was separated from his husband and his children for 2 years. Or more than 2 years. So this is one of the ways in which your rights are affected. Another example I'll give you is of this young woman in India, in Delhi, who teaches at a college, and she had a partner from Lucknow actually, and they were living together in an apartment in Delhi. And then the partner, who was only 28, she had a cerebral hemorrhage and she suddenly died. She went into a coma. Now her family came from Lucknow. Most of them didn't know anything, and they thought this girl is just a roommate, right? They didn't know that she was a partner, and so they just took their daughter and took her to Lucknow without consulting the partner, without anything. They just took her away, and she died in Lucknow. And then they took all her things, all her possessions. They took away. So the partner, when you die or you're ill, your partner has no rights at all. You may have been together for 30 years, but if your partner is ill and in hospital, then their parents, their siblings, whom they may not have much contact with, they are the ones who have all the rights. You as the spouse, even if married in a foreign country, but if you're in India, you have no rights at all. So these are just two of the ways in which it is very important to have the rights of marriage. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is where I was giving you the examples. And one more point I want to make to close with. So there are some queer activists, LGBTQ activists and queer activists who say, why should we get married at all? Marriage is a heterosexual idea, and it is patriarchal and heterosexual, and we should not get married. We should be opposed to marriage. Okay, to which I have 2 or 3 answers, 2 or 3 points to make. First point is, if you're opposed to marriage, very good, then abolish marriage altogether. Abolish it for everyone. If nobody has the right to marry, then it's fine. Nobody wants the right to marry. But as long as one group has the right to marry and the other group does not, then it is discrimination and you have the same rights under the Constitution. So if you're really opposed to marriage, please start a movement to abolish marriage first for straight people, and let's see how far you get with that. That's the important thing to do. You are happily going to your relatives and friends' marriages and straight marriages, heterosexual marriages. There you have no problem. Only when it comes to gay people, then you don't want marriage. This is my first point. My second point is that marriage is not a fixed institution. No institution is a fixed institution. You can stop the PowerPoint now. No institution is a fixed institution. Let's take the example of the university, modern university. Where does the modern university come from? It doesn't come from women's rights or LGBT rights. It comes from Christian monastery. What were Oxford and Cambridge? Oxford and Cambridge were monasteries. They were founded in the Middle Ages as Christian monasteries. What is the meaning of professor? When you're a professor, it means you profess the Christian religion. That's the original meaning of the word professor. Okay, if you were not a Christian, if you were Jewish, for example, you could not join Oxford and Cambridge. You couldn't get a degree from there. You couldn't teach there because you were not professing the Christian religion. You couldn't be a professor, right, or a student actually. This only changed in the late 19th century, and now, does that mean that women, of course, were not allowed into it? It was an all-male institution until the 19th century. Does that mean women should not have joined the university because it's a heterosexual patriarchal institution? Obviously not. In fact, Virginia Woolf, the writer Virginia Woolf, on whom I did my PhD, she said that. She said it's an all-male institution, the university, and it's very patriarchal, so women should not join it. Women should stay outside and have their own institutions. And I think in this one case, she was wrong. She was wrong. Obviously, when women join the university changes. It doesn't remain the same static thing. Nothing remains static. Things are changing over time. The university today, Oxford and Cambridge, are very different from what they were in the 10th century or the 18th century, right? Same with marriage. Marriage today is completely different from what it was 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago, or even 50 years ago. It has changed a lot. The right to divorce, the right to share the marital property, the woman's right to custody of the children, all this was not there. All this has changed, right? So marriage is changing. And when you have same-sex marriage, it changes even more. It's the same institution, but it changes even more, just as we are all changing all the time. Our bodies are changing all the time. Our minds are changing all the time, right? We are not static. So to say marriage is patriarchal, so we shouldn't enter it, is as if marriage is a house which is fixed and is not changing. Even houses change, but it's not changing. That's not true. Marriage itself is changing all the time. So that would be my second point. I could make more arguments, but I won't. I'll stop there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us with your vision and inspiring us to be inclusive and aware about the current scenarios We are very fortunate to hear you today, ma'am. Thank you. And really sorry for little inconvenience which happened to you. Please
Thank you.
forgive.
Yeah, it's just Google Meet. Let's go.
Taking our evening further, I would like to heartily welcome our another eminent personality, Professor Anita Singh ma'am. Professor Anita Singh ma'am is a senior professor in the Department of English and coordinator, Center for Women's Studies and Development at Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, India. She received Fulbright Nehru Visiting Scholar Fellowship for the year 2013-2014 at the University of Virginia, USA. She was a fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study at Shimla, India. Her book, Staging Feminism, Gender Violence and Performance, was published by Routledge in 2021. Her other recent publications include the two edited volumes, Gender, Space, and Resistance, Women and Theatre in India, and Hero and Hero Worship, Femdom in Modern India. Ma'am is the president of the Asian African Association for Women, Gender, and Sexuality. So I would request ma'am to deliver presidential address.
Akanksha ma'am, sorry to interrupt you. Can we have few questions? Uh, Ruth Vanita ma'am has just finished her talk, and we can have a couple of questions, and after that, we will invite Anita ma'am for presidential talk. Can
Yes,
we
ma'am.
have some quick questions? Yes, someone has raised hand. Vyomkesh sir. Sir,
Good
please
evening, ma'am.
unmute
Yeah, good
yourself
evening,
and
ma'am.
talk. Yes.
Yes, ma'am, I have unmuted. This is Vyoma. I'm a research scholar in Osmania University, Hyderabad, and I'm an assistant professor. I have a question to ma'am. May I?
Sure, please go ahead.
Right,
But is
right, ma'am.
ma'am
When I
there?
was writing an, yeah, may
But
I?
ma'am,
Is
she
ma'am
left
available?
the.
Has Ruth Monica ma'am joined or she's not there? I think.
I think she signed off. Rachna, please get in touch with her. I think she signed off.
Ma'am, I'm just sending her a text right now. Just give. Ma'am, I've texted her, but it is not seen by her so far. So, can we wait for a minute and then we can proceed?
Sure.
Ma'am, I was also wondering if we could have ma'am's email or some way to contact her if we
Yes,
don't have questions immediately.
definitely. I request everyone to please drop your questions in the chat box. We'll be sending it to her. We'll send all the questions to her.
Hello? Ask Rita ma'am to speak then. The questions can be sent to her later by email. Na? So ask her to speak. I just say that.
Anita ma'am, so sorry for this interruption and the inconvenience. I think ma'am is disconnected and she hasn't seen the text yet. So we would like to proceed with the presidential talk, ma'am.
Okay. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
yeah, thank you so much, Rachna, and thank you all for inviting me in this forum. It's a very amazing, club that you have formed, the Spectrum Club. I think it's one of its kind in Varanasi, and so congratulations to you all for that, and congratulations to the principal for, uh, you know, kind of promoting you to start this whole idea. And of course it was so wonderful to have to hear Ruth Vanita as the inaugural session of this the forum that you have started, that is the LGBTQ kind of spectrum club that you call it. So, very briefly, I will not take much time. Very briefly, I'll look into what Ruth Vanita has said, and I'm just going to add a few comments of mine. So, she started off by talking about lives and literature. And in lives, basically, primarily, her thrust was that the entire concept of, same-sex relationship or these kind of heterosexuality or homosexuality and other things, they are not a Western import, as has been very often alleged that it's something that has come to us from West and so on. So this idea she has contradicted all through her lecture by talking about the lives and by talking about instances from literature. So first she takes up a lot of lives, a lot of case studies of and also her contention is that it's not just an elite affair. Homosexuality very often is thought to be something that happens only among the elite people. That also she contradicts, and she says, and then she gives several examples of tribal women, women from rural spaces, women who could not face the societal opposition and also committed suicide and so on. So these were the whole idea of lives that she takes up, and she says that and then with literature, then she comes with up starts with the ancient Indian texts, the Katha Sarit Sagar, the Ramayana, the 18th century, the medieval poets, and the 18th century writers, and then she winds it up by her own narrative, Memories of Light, published in 2021. So basically, again, then what her whole idea was that marriages are fluid. The entire concept of marriage is marriage of two souls. So marriage, it's a marriage of souls, and any institution for that matter is a very fluid concept. Cultures, society, individuals, we are all fluid and constantly changing. So the whole idea of criminalizing a certain kind of sexuality is something that is that is there since time immemorial, and that has to be contested, and that has to be addressed. The problems that that not being a legal subject creates these marriages. We are disciplined by the state. We are juridical subjects, and it is the power of the discipline and power of the state that makes us into a certain subject. So very recently, we did not recognize some people called transgender, and it is only very recently, 2014, that the transgender people were recognized. Now in 2019, we have the large way. If you look at 2014, kind of presented certain facts about the transgender identity and the way the state should move forward with regard to the transgender identity. But 2019, when the Transgender Right Act was formed, we saw that a lot of ways transgenders are still discriminated. They cannot. The issue of surrogacy, the issue of adoption, these are very serious issues. So if we have this curb cutting effect, if we look at these ideas, this recognition of individual, recognition of their sexuality, if this is done at a first instance, then there are so many other things that come that will fall into place. So so the same happened with the scraping of Article 377, where homosexuality was criminalized during the British period. And of course she has mentioned a lot of texts that talk about same-sex relationship. Even Khajuraho, if you go, there are a lot of sculptures that tell you very explicitly how same-sex relationships were valorized. Now, now if you look at, as I said, scraping of article very recently, again, there was this whole lot of argument regarding legalizing same-sex marriage in India. Now, the judgment that was given, or the verdict of the court, was that we cannot legalize same-sex marriage as it is a threat to the institution of marriage. So, if we look at the very institution of marriage, it itself is something that is a construct. All our, society is a construct. If we believe at the very basic, idea that society is a construct, we as individuals are a construct, gender identities are a construct, then how do we look at marriage? In marriage, simply saying that we oppose marriage is not the right way. The right way is to fight with the state and get your same legal status, despite their prejudices that the state has. And how can this be done? Of course, through dialogue, of course, through organizing. This could be a drop in the ocean. This spectrum club, or this gender sensitization program that we are having, add-on course that we are having, could be a very small drop in the ocean. But of course, these drop add on to the larger ocean that is to be made. So these dialogues will help us in a large way moving forward. So when this Article 377 was scrapped, Justice Sikri said that the idea of justice. I think I'm getting a call. Yeah. So the very idea of justice, she says that she was talking about this universal law of human rights, and she says that this Indu Malhotra said that the history owes an apology to these people whose identity, whose sexuality we have not recognized, who have been ostracized, who have been oppressed. So I think history has a lot to apologize now by the fact that they are again doing this flip-flop on the issue of the same-sex relationship, on the issue of transgender identity, and so on. Now, Justice Sikri further explains the idea of justice that animates Indian constitution. And she says, Justice Sikri says that Indian constitution is based on the idea of Kant's categorical imperative, John Rawls' idea of justice as fairness, and Amartya Sen's idea of distributive justice. No, there's no doubt about it that the law or the court or the higher authorities should follow these ideas of justice or marriage equality, as Professor Vanita talked about. And universal law of human rights, to close what I have to say, is the universal rights of human rights states that social norms, customs, culture, traditions, they are all fluid, and they can never be a valid justification to suppress, to negate, to ignore, to oppress another individual from asserting their fundamental, constitutional, and I would also add natural rights, because we know that early on it was said this kind of relationship are against the order of nature. So one can assert that it is in the order of nature that we recognize these individuals as full individuals and their relationships and their marriage as equally valid as any other individual. Thank you so much. And we can have some questions because Professor Vanita has joined.
Akanksha ma'am, please read the questions. Actually, somehow I got disconnected and connected again. So questions are not visible in my chat box. Can you please read the question for Ruth ma'am?
Sure. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank Anita ma'am for enlightening us with her intellectual thoughts. Thank you so much, ma'am. And now I'm reading out the questions.
Ma'am, may I unmute myself and ask a question since I couldn't type it in the chat box?
Okay.
I was waiting for ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. This is a research scholar from Usmania University, and I'm looking at othering. So, as part of othering and discrimination marginalization, I have a question. When I was writing an article looking at LGBTQ plus issues in children's literature, because I'm a researcher in children's and young adult fiction, I must say I was really facing a lot of problem in finding texts that would really talk about or initiate any discourse about this kind of an issue that is happening. When we, as part of marginalization like this, talk at a very highest level of adults, why is it that India is falling short of writing and addressing these issues at a very, very younger level, which would definitely promote little empathy and tolerance towards all these things? Why is there that shortage of books for children as such?
There are, it's not my area, children's literature is not my area, but there are a few books, I believe. There's one by Shalini Mahajan. She goes by Charles Mahajan, and there are others. There are a few books. They may not be available everywhere in small towns or in every bookstore, but there are a few books. Why is it happening? It's happening late because the issue has only recently started. Recently means in the last 15 years started being published even for adults, right? About in a major way. So it will happen. It's happening, and it will happen. There are lots of books in other countries which are not. The situation is not that different. Yeah. I should say there's Suniti Nam Joshi. Suniti Nam Joshi's books, she was a pioneering writer on the issue. She writes fables and novels and poetry and so on. So she has books that adults can read, but she also has books that are for children. Uh, Specifically children's books. Penguin has brought out, I think, some. Tulika has brought out some. So you can look for her, Suniti Nam Joshi.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, there is another question by Anvesha Adhikari, and I think it is to Ruth ma'am only. It has been often observed that being polygamous in relationship has often been linked to LGBTQI members, as we can see in Whistling in the Dark by R. Raj Rao. I wanted to know her reflection on this.
It won't be called polygamous. Polygamous means when one man has many wives, and polyandry is when one woman has many husbands, like Draupadi. Polyamorous is when you have many love affairs, and of course, lots of people, both men and women, and also men and men, have many love relationships, either one after the other or sometimes at the same time. It's just part of life. I don't think it's a new thing at all. It goes back, it's always been the case. And I don't think it's anything unique to male-male relationships. Men used to have wives and also still visit, they still do. They visit sex workers or the wives or whatever. Or they have affairs on the side. Lots of married people have affairs on the side. Both men, women do it more secretly. Men also nowadays secretly, but some do it openly and used to do it very openly. So I don't think it's anything specifically LGBT. I think it's everybody. A lot of people prefer to have many relationships. This is up to the individual. Now society frowns on it these days, but still happens. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, ma'am. Asmita, this question is from Ruth ma'am. For Ruth ma'am, Ashmita Biswas. Yes, okay. Ma'am, would you say that lesbians have been inadequately represented in Indian literature?
No, not really. I wouldn't use the word lesbians for earlier literature. Like in my next book, I've written on Hindi fiction. And see, the word lesbian comes into Indian literature, into Hindi, into Indian languages only in the 20th century. So there is a book from 1948 written by this woman, Bihari lady, Asha Sai. And it's about this very close, what I would call a romantic friendship between two women. And it has been just recently reprinted in Hindi. And it is being, it's called the first lesbian novel in Hindi. I wouldn't call it a lesbian novel. They don't use the word lesbian, and there is nothing, as far as we can see, there's no sex going on between them. It is what I would call a romantic friendship, where one of the women is in love with the other one is in love with the man. The one who is in love with the woman, she wants her to be her lifelong partner and live together, but she's a Gandhian. She's a Gandhian and she wants them to live together and work for various causes. I'm not sure I would call it lesbian. It depends how you define lesbian, but I have doubts. But as far as Indian literature is concerned, I think there is quite a bit. We just don't know about it. So Suniti Namjoshi started writing in the 1970s. That's really early. And then if you look at my book, Same Sex Love in India, you will see many people in the 20th century wrote about it. Before that, I gave you the example of the Urdu poetry, 18th, 19th century. There's a lot of this poetry. I've only translated and written about some of it. There's a lot. It goes on through the 19th century. Then I gave you the example of the 14th century Bengali texts, which talk about these relationships between women. There are quite a few, right? Quite a few of these texts talking about this in different ways. So I'm sure there is much I don't know about as well. So I wouldn't say it's too little. After all, the topic also is it's only about a few people. It's not about everybody, right? It's everybody may have the feelings, but not everybody acts on it. And so I'm not sure. Adequate, inadequate, what does it mean?
Okay. Another question to Professor Ruth ma'am. Why did most marriages happen in Goddess temple? Is it just a coincidence or anything else? It would be great to hear more from her. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know for sure. I can only speculate. I haven't done a study of how many happen in which temples. Some happen in regular ordinary temples too, not goddess temples. Leela and Urmila got married in a temple in Bhopal, and it was just any temple. So but I just noticed that some of these women, particularly in Eastern India, in Bihar, in Assam, etc., getting married in goddess temples. And that may be because Shakta, because the worship of the goddess is more widespread in that region. It's one of the reasons where it's widespread. Maybe that's the reason, maybe it's not. I don't know. I just threw it out there because it's interesting. And maybe somebody could study this. Many of these women, both in India and Nepal, got married in temples. It would be interesting to see what these temple marriages actually were like, if somebody could study it. Who were the priests who officiated the marriage? How did they get married? Now, in Varanasi, when they got married, that was a regular temple. It was not a goddess temple. It was a Vaishnav temple, I think. So, to study how these marriages actually happen in these temples, it would be all over India. It would be quite an interesting thing to do. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is from Anita ma'am. Please repeat the quote about Kant distributive justice. It had a unique interpretation. Please repeat.
So there was just an observation, a closing remark on what Professor Vanita very beautifully, explained this evening. So I was just trying to explain in the context of what Justice Sikri in a part of the 5-bench committee, and she says that the idea of justice that animates the Indian Constitution is. So she was explaining that this is what the Indian Constitution is based on, the idea of categorical imperative, Kantian categorical imperative, which is a kind of universal ethics, like, for instance, lying, to murder somebody, to cheat somebody. These are, universal ethical issues that are the same everywhere, in the same state, nation, in different times. So these will always be considered to be bad, and certain values would always be considered to be good. And then, of course, it is also animated by the idea of John Rawlson's idea of justice as fairness, and Amartya Sen's distributive justice. So if our constitution is motivated by these ideas of justice, so why are we still practicing justice? And I also quoted Justice Indu Malhotra, which says that history owes an apology. If history owes an apology, I think we are creating more issues to apologize for by this flip-flop on the issue of same-sex marriage that was very recently much in question, and it was again turned down as something that goes against the Indian tradition. So Indian tradition is again not a monolithic concept, as again Professor Vanita talked about. Traditions, customs, individuals, culture, everything changes. Everything is in a fluid state. So I think there's another question for Professor Vanita. Yes, please, Sudiksha Chatterjee, please, you can write your question.
Yeah, she does.
Pallavi also has a question. You can unmute and speak to her.
1 minute, yes. Yes. Recent years have seen a proliferation of shady depictions of the LGBTQ community on screen, especially in web series and short films. Could you share your opinion on how this affect LGBT community and its representation?
Yeah, representation. As far as representation is concerned, I think everybody should represent in whatever way they like. Nothing should be censored. We can criticize it, we may like it or not like it, but I think everybody should do what they like. And when you say shady depictions, I'm not sure what you mean, but there are plenty of shady depictions of heterosexual relationships also, right? Look at all of pornography, and most of it is heterosexual, and there's plenty of shady depictions. And I think it should be there. Let it be there. Those who want to see it, let them see it. Those who don't want to, let them not. There are plenty of wonderful positive depictions too now, right? Shubhanga Zyada Savdhan, which I say is often the film I've been waiting for all my life. Wonderful film. So there's so many films like that also. So you have all types of representations. Everything should flourish, and then you see what you like and don't see what you don't like. That would be. And how does it affect us? We as readers and viewers, we have the choice to see what we want to see and what we don't want to see. So how it affects us depends on us. It doesn't depend on the fiction itself, I think, right?
Okay, there is another question by Sudiksha. Ria Basu, please wait. So Diksha has posted first. This is to Ruth ma'am only. Same sex marriages often pose a question for the heterosexual population about who is the man slash husband or woman wife in the homosexual marriage. Do gender roles play any role in such marriages?
Yeah. Okay. This is I agree that many heterosexual people ask these silly questions. Not everybody, but some people ask these silly questions. Okay. Who is the man or the woman in a? Let's first ask about a male-female marriage. Is the man always doing the same thing and the woman always doing the same thing in private? Even no. Men, biological men, do many things, and some of them may be what we think of as more womanly, or who knows what people are doing in private. We don't know. And even in public, there are many types of men and many types of women. So even in a male female relationship, it's not a fixed thing that everybody is always doing the same thing. No. Same thing in a same sex marriage. Yes, there are some marriages where there is a division of labor. Somebody does more of the housework, somebody does more of the outside work. This can also change over time. Yeah. So when you're in earlier, you may be doing it one way, then later on it may change and you may do something else. People change over time, right? So I hope this is not being recorded and put on YouTube or anything, is it?
Uh, Ma'am, is it recording?
Is it putting on YouTube this Q&A session or not?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's going on.
Yeah, well,
Session is live.
all right. So then, even in life, people change. People may dress in one way when they are 20, and some people keep dressing the same when they're 70, and then other people don't. They change their way of dressing and behaving. Same thing with roles as well. These roles change all the time in any kind of relationship, even in a friendship. Yeah. So.
Okay. Riya Vasu, you can unmute yourself and ask question. You have raised.
Okay, good evening, ma'am, and good evening, everybody else. Actually, I more of a like it's not a question appropriately, but I just wanted to add something that when we were talking on the web series, I'm actually working on sexuality studies. The writers I have taken in concern is Mantu and Chuttai. So one thing I would just like to comment here that when we are talking about how the web series are focusing on shady descriptions, I think as sexuality scholars, we should be happy that there are descriptions. And in order to commercialize or to bring out, sex in general of any kind, of any color, description by itself is important. I remember Manto here because when he's writing, he does not give any name to sexuality. He does not say that sex of a particular kind is, sophisticated, non-sophisticated, accepted. Sex is sex, the color, the intrinsic nature of sexuality. So I think if that can be followed, because even if we go to the text, with the ancient texts which talk about sexuality, there are no bifurcations or nomenclature of that kind of sort. So that is something which I believe just came into my mind because we spoke about the web series. So I just had to add that point. This one.
Okay, and there is a question, some kind of observation actually by a student. She's saying that thank you for her session. As you said, ma'am, we can only hope, and there is a hearing on same sex marriage in the Supreme Court on April 18.
Oh, yes, there is going to be. The Supreme Court is hearing the case, and I have just, in fact, also submitted an affidavit with some of this historical material that I just presented to you. So to show them that that has been there, and I've also submitted an affidavit. So all those materials are going to be given to them, and they are going to do a hearing, and they are going to when they give a decision is a different matter. They may take some time for that. Yeah, so they are going to do that. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for addressing all the questions beautifully and satisfying the urge of our students. Both the ma'am, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite Dr. Sunita Arya, ma'am, Department of English, Vasanta College for Women, to deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Akansha ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
So thank you. Gratitude is the fairest blossom which springs from the soul. As Henry Ward Beecher said this, I, Dr. Sunita Arya, from the Department of English, Vasanta College for Women, Rajghat, Varanasi, on this note, feels incredibly honored and privileged to deliver the vote of thanks. This is a momentous day in for our college history as we are organizing 5-day online add-on course on gender sensitization towards a human understanding of LGBTQ identities under the edges of Department of English and Spectrum Club, which is very first of its kind. This Spectrum Club is quite innovative and creative in its inception and conception. This all have been made possible only through the encouragement and diligence of our principal ma'am, Professor Alka Singh, Didi, who has been always there present as a source of inspiration and our guiding star in all our endeavor. I would like to thank our esteemed guest, Professor Ruth Vanita Ma'am, retired professor of English, University of Montana, US, for the keynote address and delivering such an enlightening, engaging, and thought provoking talk. I would also like to pay tribute to Professor Anita Singh Ma'am, Department of English, and co-coordinator, Center for Women Studies and Development, BHU, Varanasi, for her presidential address. And I must acknowledge, it is always a pleasure to listen to you, ma'am. I would like to thank Dr. Rachna Pandey, Didi, for the elaboration of the concept note. I would like to thank Department of English, Professor Manjari Junwala ma'am, Dr. Saurav Singh, Dr. Rachna Pandey, and the members of Spectrum Club, Dr. Akanksha Trivedi ma'am, Dr. Rashika Jain ma'am, Priyanka Patel ma'am, for working day and night for the inception of this coursework and the Spectrum Club and its actualization. Words would fall short for describing how much knowledge we would derive from this add on course in this 5 days and the important network we would create. Lastly, I would like to thank our students and participants who are the most important stakeholder in this program and they would benefit from this course in their academic journey. I hope we continue to work like this and organize such events in future for the betterment of our students and faculty member. Thank you.
So, lastly, thank you everyone, all the guests, teachers, eminent professors for joining us today and making this event a memorable one. And now we have come to end of the session. So we are ending the event. Thank you so much. Rachna ma'am?
Uh, yes, thank you so much, everyone. I hope all of you have filled in the feedback form. Please remember to join the session tomorrow at 5. You have the schedule there. So please be on time. Join in the beginning of the session, not in the middle of it or at the end of it. Join through Google Meet